Welcome in this special Sunday edition of On Texas Football. CJ Vogel and myself, we're going to talk about Arch Manning through 2 starts as a Texas Longhorn. Saying that, we do believe Quinn Ewers will be back and be the starting quarterback in 2 weeks when Texas is in the Cotton Bowl playing Oklahoma. But CJ, it's time to talk about Arch's second start, because I think going into Saturday, what you wanted to see was progression from start 1 to start 2. And I definitely think we saw that from Arch. And I want to get into what we saw. Before we get into the statistics, which were very good, albeit against a team that's given up statistics to everybody. Before we get into that part of it, CJ, I thought just the demeanor, there's a lot of pressure that comes with being Arch Manning and then having Manning and wearing 16 at the University of Texas. Just to having that jersey on with that name on it, and you're at the University of Texas and you made your first start when Texas was ranked number 1 for the first time in 16 years, then that's before the pressure you put on yourself. So that was a very pressure-packed start 1 for Arch Manning. But CJ, I thought we saw a much more relaxed quarterback that was having more fun in the second start. Is that kind of what you saw as well?
Yeah, watching Arch on Saturday, I didn't get the idea that it was his first time playing an SEC caliber opponent, right? And we could say what we want about Mississippi State, and they have given up plays to about everybody so far this year, but in that moment where it's hyped up as Texas's first ever introduction to the SEC conference, maybe you would have seen some fluster moments. We saw it against ULM. They got pressure early. That first interception was not a good throw. It was not a good decision. It was because of pressure, and maybe it was because of the built-up expectation of what he was expected to do as the quarterback at Texas, wearing the Manning last name and everything that comes with that hype. So to your point, and the offensive line, I thought, was tremendous in pass protection. He had all day to sit back there and pick apart and find guys running open, and there were plenty of them. But for Arch to make the throws that he made, he was on time. He never put the ball in harm's way. On 35 dropbacks, 31 pass attempts, there was not a single throw in which I looked at it and said, okay, that probably is going to be an X on film, right? And that's very encouraging.
It's good, bad, and ugly went down this week with Sark.
Yes.
The ugly went down.
100%. So it was twofold. Sark certainly helped him with the play callings. I thought Arch Manning did a great job of finding the open guy. He did, in my opinion, a really fine job of going from read 1 to 2 to 3. There were several instances where I even thought on an incompletion or two, he still could have found a check down. But when you're averaging 83.9% completion, you're doing something pretty darn well at the moment.
Yeah, and that was kind of my thing was, look, in his first start against UL Monroe, I think Sark was very aggressive because he saw safeties against UL Monroe, said they can't turn and run.
Yeah.
And so Sark, I think, had been waiting for a game to be super aggressive down the field. And it just so happened Arch is a starter who throws a tremendous deep ball. I mean, if there's one thing that's going to constantly be said about Arch Manning at his time at Texas before the NFL draft, he is a tremendous deep ball thrower. Now, the late deep throws weren't ideal in week 1. Right. But Sark really wanted to attack down the field. And like Sark said, he said, I thought we became too much of a 250 hitter in the baseball term.
I thought it was a great analogy there.
I thought it was a great analogy too, right? I mean, CJ, because Texas threw 10 shots over more than 20 yards down the field in that game. You had that stat. That's the most ever for Sark at Texas. I think they dialed that back to 4 or 5 this week, if the stats are correct.
They did. And I think he went away from the Joey Gallo approach, right? And that's just swinging for the fences, praying for a home run. When you complete, 51.7% of your passes, it's hard to find that rhythm, right? The big plays were there, and that was great. They were fun. They were exciting. They made the highlight reels, but you never saw that true consistency, and it was aided by those 2 3-and-outs in the third quarter against ULM. But yes, to your point, the average distance of target dropped from 14.2 to 8.4. That gives you an idea of how much a Sarkisian offense wants to get the ball out underneath. And that 8.4 range is where we've seen Quinn Ewers make a lot of his money in college, dating back to 2023, a year ago, where that was his season-long average. And so far this year, he's sitting right in that range as well. So that feels like the money spot for this Texas offense. And, I think Mississippi State also came out and said, we saw what you did a week ago. We're not letting you get deep vertically down the field. The first drive specifically, what were the first 2 passes? Deep curls, deep comebacks, and they were put on a rope by Arch Manning. I thought he started out tremendous. First quarter, 7 of 8 passing, 105 yards. I don't think it could get much better than that. Obviously, the offense has stalled a little bit, so you didn't see those numbers, skyrocket perhaps, but really strong start. And again, to see the change to let's get the underneath, let's get these guys some work where they can before taking the shots deep, and there were. It was a great sight for me.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And look, Texas has a tremendous. Not only is Sark a great play caller, but they have really good intermediate game receivers on this team. Matthew Golden is tremendous intermediate game receiver. I think Isaiah Bond is as well, and I think Gunnar Helm, obviously. So you have 3. When you start a game, you're starting a game with 3 really high-end intermediate targets and players. And then you have DeAndre Moore, who you would think is an intermediate guy, and he can be really good, but he's kind of sneaky deep because he's such a smooth route runner. Yes. People are always going to underestimate his speed. All right, statistically speaking, let's start here. Let's go. Week 1 for Arch was 15 of 29, 258, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 rush, -4 yards, 73.3 QBR. Jump to this week, 26 of 31, 324, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, QBR rating 79.5, and he actually had an explosive run, 26-yard run, so he added 6 rushes for 33 yards. So statistically, huge jump, as you would expect, a big jump from week 1 to week 2. And the caveat I want to talk about here before we get to how Arch did it was we are always real on the show. Mississippi State gave up 23 of 28 against Toledo and 26 of 28 against Florida. So Sark saw things on video that they could attack that other teams had success with. And the last 3 games, now Mississippi State's given up 87% completions, which is an unbelievable number for a defense. But how did Arch do it, CJ, is what we want to talk about.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you look at it, I thought he did a very fine job of finding that intermediate phase, right? He was 6 of 8 passing the ball between 10 and 20 yards, and he was 3 of 4 passing beyond 20 yards. But you start looking at where Texas really wanted to make Arch kind of throw the football to, and that was underneath, right? Allow them to get these guys the ball in space. And I thought they did a good job. Mississippi State also kind of shot gaps. They shot, we saw the Ryan Wingo bubble where he got dinged up on. They were very aggressive and basically playing with their back foot planted and let's keep everything in front of us. Whenever we see guys, start to block off the line, we're blitzing immediately. And Texas had a route open for Arch Manning and the Longhorns on one of those pump and go situations. And, again, I think that's going to be a staple of this offense. The one thing that I think we can maybe critique right now for Arch, and I say this about Quinn, where the corner route maybe isn't his best specialty route on the tree right now. The wheel route to the running back has been open in back-to-back weeks. And again, this is just being very picky and, critiquing to the level that we've come to expect the quarterback play at Texas to be. The wheel route's been open 2 weeks in a row, and they've yet to connect there. But, I thought for sure there were some NFL-level throws, and yes. I'll toss this to you. That throw to DeAndre Moore was
unbelievable.
One of the better throws that you'll see from a college quarterback in the entire season. That was spectacular to be hit on a 6-man rush with a 5-man pressure or 7 versus 6, whatever it was. You had a free guy coming off the front side, opposite hash, outside the numbers, right on the money in a moment where Texas desperately needed some momentum offensively.
Yeah, and look, I think maybe one of the things that makes a great deep ball thrower to me, past the mechanics, is the willingness to step in and take the hit, knowing you're going to get hit and throwing the ball down the field. Because these are longer developing plays. If you're taking shots down the field, your odds of getting hit are going up. And Arch through 2 games he is solidified that I will stand in the pocket and I will step into a throw when I can, even if I know I'm going to get hit in the chest or mouth or in the chin. And that to me separates deep ball throwers a lot of times. But once you get past the mechanics and the arm strength, then to me, that throw to DeAndre Moore was, I think that was the best throw Arch has made at Texas. I've seen him make it Texas in his time at Texas because Texas really needed it, by the way. They needed to go in up 14-6, knowing they were going to get the ball to start the second half. That was a critical play for Texas at that point in time because you didn't want to have a 7-6 halftime.
It was 3rd and 8 too. It was
yeah. And that was the thing, CJ. That's a great point. That third down pass, the third down bomb that Jonte Cook in the breadbasket that were dropped Arch, that's another thing about deep ball throwers. That's a great point. He's making third down accurate deep balls. When the pressure's on, third
Big
down.
moment, yeah.
He had, if Jonte doesn't drop the touchdown, then he would have had 4 deep balls connected in that, or deeper passes, 20 yards or more connections in that game. Obviously, DeAndre Moore caught 2 of those for touchdowns. But I just, again, think his toughness in the pocket, that's really going to translate for him long-term in football. Now, outside the pocket, dude's got to get down sometimes. For me. I thought the play in the third quarter, when he kind of lowered his shoulder up the middle, maybe Texas needed it. There were some moments where you remember you watched Sam Ehlinger, Sammy E play, and you said, okay, Texas needed that play at that moment from him, that tough play. I think Texas may have needed that from Arch at the time. But there were a couple of plays in the first half where as he plays more, he's going to learn that he's got to get down a little bit. He took too many hits. Yeah,
and I think that's part of him just wanting to get back out on the football field. He mentioned after the ULM game, it felt good to be hit again. But to your point, you already got one quarterback dinged up. And that sandwich hit that he took, I was sitting there in the box thinking, oh, get up, brother. Yes, I completely agree. But his legs, you got to respect him. I thought that 20-yard scamper, he certainly found the end zone, I thought. I don't know how that was overturned. But you have to defend against that. And we've seen that for Texas's opponents so far, and you'll see it later this year when Texas faces a Michael Hawkins, when they face a Taylon Green. These guys add a certain dimension to their game. Mississippi State tried to run quarterback power with a lead from the running back a few times in that first half, and it was effective. You get 5 or 6 yards. I'm not saying Texas is going to go that way, but it adds to your offense. Now, with that said, it certainly helps kind of evade pressure in the box as well. And that's where I wanted to pivot a little bit. Against ULM, he was 0 for 7 passing the ball under pressure. That's with the guy in his face, getting hit, whatever the situation might have been. He was 2 for 3. He ended up taking a sack and a half, whatever you want to call it. He only lost about a yard on one of those sacks, but he's finding ways to get the ball out quicker. I know that there wasn't a whole lot of pressure, but Gerry, from what we saw in the limited moments of Arch under pressure against Mississippi State, did he feel more composed? Did he make the right reads? I thought it was a clean day all the way around, but more so in taking that step of feeling the pressure and understanding the time that he had to throw the ball. We saw him take off a few times, and that was a positive as well.
I think really a big part of that was what Sark said in his Monday press conference. He said, when Arch just has fun and plays free, that's when he's at his best. And I know that's easy to say for anybody, but I think Sark's point was he puts a lot of pressure on himself. Mm-hmm. And there's already enough pressure to carry when you're Arch Manning and you played at Isidore Newman and you're ranked number 1 in the country by most people coming out of high school. Oh, and by the way, you chose to wear 16 with an orange jersey on. Okay. It's a different color orange, but you put a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to start before you put any pressure on yourself. And if you're playing under pressure, I think that's at times is where you see it. Those are the force that's playing in the pocket, that's playing under pressure. He looked more athletic on the field this Saturday versus last Saturday for me, CJ. I thought his first start, he didn't look like the athlete he is in the game. He looked more like the athlete he is Saturday. So let's ask this. Let's talk about this, because barring Quinn getting hurt again, this may be the last start Arch has this season.
Yeah, could be.
Where do we think he graded his first performance a C+? And I thought it was a C or C+, if I'm being real. And I thought that a lot of that was pressure he put on himself, which I was kind of concerned. I was like, man, you can't if you put this much pressure on yourself, man, it's gonna be tough to play.
As a quarterback at Texas, yeah, good luck.
If you put that much pressure, it's going to be tough to perform. But where would you grade? We know what PFF graded it, number 1 all season. Where would you grade that second performance? And then I'll throw mine out there.
Yeah, real quick on that PFF grade, 94.2 against Mississippi State. Not only was it the highest graded quarterback of week 5, it was the highest individual graded game by a quarterback the entire season so far. So pretty good. In my eyes, it's an A+. And I say that you throw the football 31 times. You don't have any turnover-worthy plays. You're sitting there. You protected the rock. You eclipsed 300 yards. You find the end zone 3 different times. The offense was herky-jerky. There was no true rhythm in that first half, yet it never felt like he was flustered. And for a guy making his second ever start, that's a special kid you got throwing the football there, Gerry. I have it as an A+.
Yeah, I was C plus on the opener. I think Arch gave himself a C plus, and I'm going A plus because of how much improvement there was from week 1 to week 2. He took the pressure off himself, and maybe it's natural having one start under his belt. And I may have been a little too hard on him the first week because he's a starter for the number 1 ranked team in the country, making his first start, plus all the pressure he puts on himself and the media hype that went into it. We know it's going to be a media circus, but he looked more like an athlete Saturday that he is. He played more like the athlete he is. And again, deep balls in this game were tremendous. I mean, if Jonte doesn't drop that ball, you're looking at 27 of 31 for 385, 386. And I know Mississippi State's given up a lot this year, but that would have been a truly tremendous performance. So we're not going to be Sark. Sark, after the post game, said, he was 26 to 31. I was ripping his ass. We're not going to do that. We're going to give him an A plus here to end the show, CJ.
I like that a lot. And there's still moments that he can improve. I actually had it written down, watching the game. There were 2 plays that I thought he could have checked down, and probably the 2 incompletions, right? The first one was 14-20 left in the second quarter. It felt like pocket was collapsing a little bit. He had a guy in the flat, didn't opt to look that way. I believe incompletion or a sack. That's play number 1. Play number 2, 12:49 in the third quarter. He had Juan Davis open in the flats. Again, opted not to go that way. But fortunately for Arch, I think you saw the learning curve happen in real time. Because what did he do about, 7 to 8 minutes later? It felt like he was up off the ground horizontal. And he goes, oh, shoot, I got Jarrett Gibson out here. Let me find a way to get it to him. And he did for a gain of 8. So that's where you start to see him, in real time, get the brain churning and saying, oh, yeah, I do have a guy somewhere in my vicinity that I can get the ball to. That, to me, was the number 1 sign of, oh, he's got it here, Gerry. He's learning.
Well, and the other thing for him, this was a tough game outside of Mississippi State being a horrendous defensive team. Within the game, this was a tough game to be a quarterback in the first half because you didn't have the ball. No. Then when you did have the ball, you had a turnover. Jaden Blue fumbled going into the red zone. Then you had a drop touchdown. I mean, that was a tough because it was hard to get in any rhythm, but you didn't have the ball much. You sat there on the sideline, and there's only so many times you can look at your pad and before you put it away, and then you're watching what Mississippi State's just holding the ball for minutes, and you're sitting there going, man, when are we going to get a chance again? So
sitting there saying, wow, another delay of game. When am I getting back up there?
And there were some timely holding calls too for Texas, right?
That's true.
So, I mean, he went through a lot in that game from a quarterback perspective, trying to stay warm, ready, engaged fully. And I'm not saying quarterbacks aren't engaged, but it's more difficult when you're sitting on the sidelines and the other team has the ball for minutes at a time, and you see the clock just running away from you in the first half. Then you have to turn, then you have to fumble by Blue, then you have the drop touchdown pass. There was even some adversity despite going 26 of 31 in that game. The game within the game for him. And I thought he did a really good job with that. All right, well, that's going to do it for this special Sunday on Texas football, talking Arch Manning after 2 starts. By the way, season stats, 55 to 78, 900 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 13 rushes, 82 yards, 3 touchdowns. Texas 5-0. We'll see if they're still ranked 1 when the new polls come out after Alabama's game Saturday. All right, CJ, anything in closing?
I was just very encouraged by the improvement from week 1 as a starter to week 2. I think the ceiling, as we know, with a 5-star quarterback with the last name Manning, is going to be very high, and he proved it. In 2 of the 3 games that we saw extended snaps from, I couldn't be more pleased. And, again, I thought that ULM game was a great game for him to sit back, watch the tape, and learn. And for him, I think the key, and we've talked about this, just have fun. He said he had a lot more fun despite maybe having that herky-jerky start in the first half. For the offense in general, the game felt slower. It felt more fun. And if that's the case, that's a recipe for a lot of touchdowns and completions later on.
And for from a Texas team standpoint, the team has, they had confidence in Arch's ability, but now getting to see it on the field really helps this team if Quinn kind of has another injury this year, if something happens, re-injures himself. So we'll see. Hopefully that's not the case. But Texas is better in their beliefs in their quarterbacks now than they were even 3 weeks ago. There's no doubt about it because they've had 2 guys. Quinn was playing at a really high level, and then they saw Saturday at where Arch could go. So that was really good for this Texas team. And that was great, I think, that Arch got a couple of starts. And you don't want to see Quinn go down, but if he goes down, your number 2 guy gets 2 starts. You look really good in those 2 starts, and now you're headed to Oklahoma with the off week ahead. So, all right, for CJ Vogel, I'm Gerry Hamilton. This has been a special Sunday edition talking a little bit of Arch Manning, and we'll see you tonight in Longhorn Livestream.